What is going on, everyone? I hope you are doing well and welcome back to the channel. My name is Drew, and in this video I have another book review. And this book in particular is for anyone who works in higher education, especially those who work with students, and I would almost require it for anyone who works in student affairs. And it is called The Impact of a Sense of Belonging in College: Implications for Student Persistence, Retention, and Success. This was compiled and written by Erin M, Bentrim, Gavin W, Henning, and Kristen A, Renn. And this book was a phenomenal resource, or at least that's how I felt. And it's sort of like a literature review or a compilation of current literature regarding belonging in college. And there are a few chapters that really talk about what belonging means. But more importantly, with this book, there are chapters that break down subpopulations of students and how they view belonging. And so this is many different chapters. So you would consider students of different race and ethnicity. They talk about first generation status, low socioeconomic status students, veterans, commuter students, and students with multiple identities, and everything in between. There are so many chapters, and they cited so many great pieces of literature. This is a great source for really looking into how we can better serve our students. And I feel like this is important because we all know that students need to feel a sense of belonging, but the challenge is there's really no one-size-fits-all approach. We can do the best that we can with programming and events and outreach and really try to let the students know that they do belong at our institution and we do care. But it means different things to different groups of people. And I think that's where we can become the most effective, and by understanding those little nuances and how we can address them. And so when I was reading the book, some examples to compare is, for example, Native American students, they are more likely to feel that they belong if they're able to connect to other Native American students. Now you compare that to Asian American students, and they are less likely to really sort of get involved outside of the classroom, and they may be more likely to feel connected if they're able to kind of explain what's going on in class to a classmate outside of the classroom. And then you take that and then you look at LGBT plus students, where they feel that belonging, what that means to them is a sense of safety and acceptance and feeling that they can be themselves. And so when you look at those three groups, they all have different meanings and they all respond differently to what belonging means to them. So now the challenge is how do you create a program or an initiative at scale to be able to be inclusive of all of these groups and to address each and every group so that the group does feel recognized by the institution? And that is sort of the million-dollar question, but I think this book is a great start in really looking at what can we do in our immediate sphere of influence. There were some other chapters that I thought were very unique and some things that I pulled that I didn't know myself, specifically with commuter students. Now, I understand that commuter students are not first-year students, but what was interesting about this chapter, they were saying that when it comes to relationships, the emotional support and those sorts of relationships that commuter students have, or excuse me, they're not commuter students, transfer students, how transfer students are different from first-year students. The transfer students have their emotional support and those sorts of relationships off campus. And what they're looking for on campus are relationships that are more of information and how they can succeed academically and finish their degree. And reading that makes me think, and then seeing that in practice, it really makes that connection. And so the suggestion is when you're creating sort of a transfer orientation, really focus on those steps to take and the academic groundwork to be able to finish that degree path and graduate, rather than the social aspects and what you can kind of do for fun or in between classes that you would normally reserve more for the first year students. I have heard transfer students say similar things, and it's also trying to find ways to make that possible. And I think where I get this mixed up in my head is because I'm also thinking of commuter students, and when you're trying to do programming for them, they do want to get involved, but they can't always make the traditional programming times. So they may not be able to do something in the evening. And so it was suggested in this book, maybe look at times when it's in between class or there's a dead period during the day and it's near where the students are. Because once they're off campus, they're not going to come all the way back just for an event unless they're really motivated. So there's so many little things that you need to be aware of in order to be able to serve your students effectively. There's also another chapter that was devoted to ESL students, or students whose primary language is not English, and how they respond and how they feel more comfortable in their belongings, what we can do. And some of those examples were using subtitles or encouraging them to use their primary language. And it makes me think that, you know, if you were to go abroad and you kind of know the local language, but you don't feel comfortable with it, if you met someone who said, you know, please use English and we will help you along the way, I think you'd feel a little bit more relaxed and comfortable knowing that they were at least trying to meet you halfway, and it would almost make you more motivated to want to try to learn that local language. So I think that was great advice, specifically for the ESL students. Now, my favorite chapter was actually about social media. And I thought this was very unique for this type of book, but what it really honed in on is how social media just creates isolation and loneliness and anxiety, and how that actually negatively impacts memory and attention and learning and motivation. And so there were suggestions in this chapter about how do you have that conversation with students to have sort of a healthy relationship with social media. Maybe it's cutting out those influences that make you feel isolated or less than and insecure, or maybe only engaging in positive conversations through those social media platforms. I think this is, probably one of the most valuable pieces that I found in this book, because that's not openly talked about. And I think when I'm thinking with a programming mind, I could probably create some sort of programming around that and having those conversations, especially with first-year students. So it also taps into mental health and wellness, which I think is growing. And I think we are seeing a lot more initiatives and departments and programs being developed across the country to address that. So this chapter sort of falls in line with that. Now, this book is actually fairly recent because there's a chapter about how COVID impacted students and their sense of belonging. And it essentially boiled down to is they did not like being away from their campus. They did not like being in isolation and not being able to physically interact with their classmates. And I think that's telling, because what we're seeing now is we kind of use that virtual connection as a crutch and we use that as convenience, but I still think students are craving that face-to-face interaction, and this kind of supports that. So I'm curious to see what happens in the coming years and how we interact with those students who have started to, as they get older and COVID becomes more distant in our past. The book also supports a lot of these studies with a few chapters of case studies, and they talk about a few schools and some of the programs they do and how they feature or really emphasize on creating belonging. And they're very unique. I hadn't heard of any of them. Not that I have, but I liked them. I thought they were very creative and unique and effective. And if you are looking to create a program yourself, I think these are great examples to build your foundation from. So I recommend this book to anyone who really works in student affairs or works directly with students. I think they had a wealth of citations in there. So if you want to fall down rabbit holes within each chapter of studies regarding those subpopulations, this is the book for you. So that being said, if you have not heard of this, please go look it up. Go get yourself a copy. I think everyone, your department, your colleagues will find value in this, especially if you are at an institution where you may have a subpopulation of students that you are not retaining and you're looking for ways to really connect with those students. This is a great starting point for that. So if you have read it or if you are familiar with that, let me know in the comments. I have come across these authors many times before, so if you are familiar with the authors, let me know as well. And as always, hit that like button. If you want to continue to see more book reviews, hit that subscribe button. And I'm always open to suggestions as well. So if there is a book that you would love me to review, or if there's a book that you think I should check out, be sure to let me know as well. And as always, I will catch you in the next one.